I am a consultant here in South Carolina. I've been working in consulting, my CC Bozard consulting since about 1998. So I've been doing this for quite a while. And really, I specialize mostly in working with boards, helping boards become better at what they do in terms of building their capacity to help achieve the mission of your organization. I also do a number of strategic planning, and I do interim leadership, which means I step in when an organization has lost their executive director, help keep the ship afloat while the board does a search for a new executive director. And in fact, was fortunate enough to have been the interim for Together SC when it was Scanpo a couple of times. So I'm really pleased to be here with y'all. We are going to spend the next 30 minutes talking about the partnership between the executive director and the board chair. I'm going to say executive director. It's interchangeable with CEO, but just for the sake of consistency, I'm going to say executive director, and I'm going to say board chair. Could be board president, but so you just can interchange the words as we need to. I think that we would all agree that let's see if I can get this to switch. Come on, there we go. I think before we really get started to talk about specifically about the board chair and executive director relationship, I want to talk a couple of minutes about just the overall partnership with the board of directors. I think everybody here on this session would agree that we'd really like for our boards to become exceptional in the work that they're doing. Wouldn't you agree that we're all looking for that really spectacular, exceptional board? And I believe, honestly, that building that board staff partnership is the foundation for having that exceptional board that really works hard to assure that the mission of your organization is being achieved. I've got a quote on the slide here. It comes from a really phenomenal book called The Source, 12 Principles of Governance that Power Exceptional Boards. It's a great board training resource. It's a great way to initiate conversations among your board members during board meetings. Got all kinds of ideas of great ways to use this resource. But for us today, I want you to read they talk about building an exceptional board. The foundation of that is the board staff partnership. And so the quote says, while the board has primary responsibility for oversight and policy while delegating management responsibilities to the chief executive, exceptional boards understand the value of becoming an ally with the chief executive in pursuit of the mission. Exceptional boards recognize that they cannot govern well without the chief executive's collaboration, and the chief executive understands they cannot lead the organization to its full potential without the board's unflagging support. So this partnership between the board and the staff relies very heavily on mutual respect, mutual trust, honest communication. And so here's, there we go. This is what it looks like when you have a strong partnership between the board and the executive director. If you have a strong partnership together, you really have a shared understanding of the mission and the vision of the organization. Together, you have created what this vision for the organization of what it could be, and then creating that mission for how it is that you're going to achieve that ultimate vision and dream of what could be. You're all together on the same plate, so you have that shared understanding. You are very clear about your roles and responsibilities, clear about what the board's responsibilities are, what the executive director's responsibilities, and where there may be overlap. And where there may be overlap, you understand that it's really important to have open and honest communication about all things related to your organization. You have a culture or a standing policy of no surprises, that board members don't walk into your board meeting and get surprised by something that's happening. Same thing with you, with the executive director, that you have mutual respect among each other, and that you have a two-way evaluation. That means that the board is evaluating the executive director on an annual basis, and they are also evaluating themselves on a regular basis. Remember that in reality, I'll think about this, in today's world, in today's society, there is no possible way that the executive director can do it alone or that the board can do it alone. Teamwork is the key to achieving success. So remember that you've got to work together achievement of the mission really depends, oops, sorry about that, on this board partnership. Now, having said that, let's talk then a little bit about the chair relationship, because in reality, in all honesty, y'all, a strong board and executive director partnership relies significantly on how well the chair and the executive director work together. So I want to spend the rest of our time this morning talking about how to build and then how to maintain this strong partnership and leadership. So I think first and foremost, it's really important to have a clear understanding of what the role of the board chair is. So I'm going to ask you, you don't have to answer the question, but think about, do you have a job description for what the board chair does? Really important for them to have a clear understanding of what the expectations are for what they are going to be responsible for before they even take the job. So think about, take a look at whether you have a job description. There's a study was done called Voices of Board Chairs. It was published by the Alliance of Nonprofit Management. They received responses from almost 700 self-identified nonprofit board chairs across the country. And in this study, the 3 board chair top responsibilities that were identified were to keep the board's focus on the strategic direction of where the organization is going. Let's keep that focus up here. How are we moving forward in that strategic direction? 2 was making sure that the board fulfills all of its governance responsibilities, understanding what those responsibilities are and making sure the board adheres to those responsibilities. And then, of course, the one that we all know and love is presiding over and managing board meetings. It's really important, I think, to clarify the role of the chair as it is in relationship to the full board, as it is to the executive director and to the community, so that you have that shared agreement about what it is that the board chair is going to be responsible for. Board chairs that are here to be really an effective board leader means that you are approachable, you're available, you are able to look at things objectively, you're very good at listening actively. You are kind of a up here kind of person who looks at things strategically, that you're very knowledgeable about the organization, and that you are respected in the community. So, all right, so that's the board chair's duty. So let's look at the partnership a bit. Y'all, for those of you who know me, I am a visual person, and so I want you to think about the board chair executive director partnership like you might a tennis doubles team. I don't know how many of y'all play tennis out there. I don't, but I absolutely understand how the doubles team is supposed to work, right? So when you're on a doubles team, it's really important that you are working in sync, that you cover each other's backs, and you both take turns at the net, right? So I love that visual of it's the board chair, the executive director as tennis double partners. I really honestly believe that this partnership between the executive director and the board chair is going to be the foundation for whether or not you're going to be successful in having a very engaged and effective board of directors. Chairs, you want to be the closest partner that the executive director has in this organization. As partners, you want to be on the same page about moving forward to achieve your mission. So take a minute and think about whether you're on the same page or not. A couple of years ago, actually, when COVID hit, I was working with an organization in Brunswick, Georgia, and he called me up because he felt that when COVID first hit, it was going to be really important to put things on pause, right, and not do any fundraising for a little while. He felt like they needed to take a step back when COVID hit. But in having a conversation with his board chair thought this was the time to go out there and really heavy hitting hard to do fundraising. So they clearly were not on the same page. And so how can they help the organization move forward when they have very diverse perceptions about what the appropriate role is for the organization right now? So have regularly check in to make sure that you and the executive director and the board chair are together on the same page. You want the chair to be the executive director's confidant, thinking partner, and actually the bridge to the rest of the board. You want to be a leadership partner. You want to be the chair should be the sounding board for the executive director. It's together that you're going to be working to engage the board members and keep them engaged. If y'all have questions or comments, y'all stick them in the chat and we'll catch up with it in a, yeah, I see we've got several chats. Okay, we're telling who we're in here. Great. All right. So sorry. Let's move on to maybe. There we go. Talk more specifics about the board chair and executive director partnership. So here's another visual for y'all. You know, really, this partnership is very much like a good marriage. It's based on mutual respect. It's based on trust. It's based on commitment to each other and to the organization and open and honest communication. It takes very deliberate consideration for how you will support the ongoing relationship, whether you're the executive director or the board chair. And it's going to take really hard work to maintain the relationship. Y'all, you can't sit back and just expect that the relationship is going to be fine for the entire year or 2 years or beyond that you have somebody as a chair with the working with the executive director. You have to work at this constantly, just like you would if you were working on a good marriage. If you sit on your laurels, then you don't know what's going to, then chances are that the relationship is going to start to fray on the edges, right? You never want the executive director to feel alone. And I didn't talk about my background, but I've been an executive director for several different organizations, but in addition to being the interim, and there's many a time that I felt alone, that I didn't have a partner working in sync with me to move the organization forward. You never want that to happen. You want the chair to be the executive director's thinking and governing partner and navigating the organization forward into the future. Understanding the role of each in the partnership will build that foundation and will help make sure that you have that mutual respect and trust. The way that you can look at this, y'all, is that the executive director is the managing partner, managing the operations, the operational activities of the organization, and the chair leads the board, keeping a focus on helping them keep a focus on strategic direction and making sure that the board is fulfilling all of their governance and support responsibilities. Another one of my fun visuals, y'all, is that, excuse me, I a lot of times think of the board chair as the conductor of an orchestra, right? So the board chair is the one who she doesn't necessarily know how to play the flute and the trombone and the snare drums, right? But they know how to keep all of those instruments working together, playing together to make beautiful music. That's what the board chair is doing. The board chair is making sure that everybody is working together, everybody is pulling out their own weight, moving forward towards that common vision, towards that common mission. So while the executive director is managing the organization, managing the operational pieces of what's going on, the board chair is the person leading the board, helping them move forward. Now, it's important to realize that both the board chair and the executive director, when they are doing this, right, they share leadership, they share power in their mutual pursuits to advance the mission. As I said, the executive director is the gatekeeper for staff, and the chair is the gatekeeper for the board. In that Voices study that I mentioned previously, when chairs were asked what their relationship with the executive director was built on, the people in that study responded that communication between meetings, meeting obligations to one another, and mutual respect. Those are the three things that their relationships were built on. When they were asked what they perceived their role to be in relationship to the executive director, they listed a leadership partner and a sounding board. I can't stress enough how important that sounding board is, that piece of, again, not feeling that you're alone, but that you have somebody that you can trust, that you can go to use as a sounding board, to bounce ideas off of, to process different critical issues. And just, that partnership is really, really important. I'm going to guess we don't have questions yet, so I'm going to move on. So, as I said, this is a partnership that needs regular attention. It needs nurturing. It needs cultivation. Regular communication is so important to managing this partnership, y'all. It's really, 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 I'm gonna say that 3 times, important that the chair and the executive director stay in close contact. And we're gonna talk about communication in a little bit more detail in just a minute, but you wanna make sure that you're building or creating a culture between the executive director and the chair that allows for open dialogue. That if you have that trusting, respectful relationship, that you can talk about some things sometimes that are challenging, that you may not agree on. In my example, the gentleman I was working with who board chair wanted to do lots of fun. They had to have some serious conversations, and obviously they were not agreeing to find their way forward to help the organization keep moving forward during COVID. You guys need to make sure that you're meeting each other's needs. So talk to each other about what's needed to feed the partnership. If some one of you is not feeling like the partnership is equitable, talk about that. Have conversations about that. Check in. Um, Talk about what's needed to maintain the relationship. What do you both need in order to carry out your individual responsibilities? Do you need something, executive directors? Do you need something from the chair so that you can do your job? And vice versa. Board chairs do you need the executive director to do something for you so that you can carry out your responsibilities? That's really important. And speaking of individual responsibilities, both the chair and the executive director need to agree on their roles, right? We've talked about that. Talk about those roles. Be sure that you talk about when you get into any gray areas or areas of shared leadership, which I'm going to mention in just a second, but you do have areas of shared leadership. While the executive director is working with staff and the chair is working with the board, there are times when you are working together to help fulfill the mission of the organization. So, be willing to talk about that, recognize that that's going to happen, uh, uh, talk with each other so that you agree on what the division of labor is. And honestly, y'all, I really think that this is a good conversation to have before your person becomes chair. So if it's somebody who is a chair elect or a vice chair that's moving into the chair position, can you have those conversations ahead of time? Talk about expectations, talk about what is it that you're going to need from me as an executive director to be able to fulfill your job and make you a spectacular board chair and vice versa. So if you have the opportunity to have those conversations before they take on that job, terrific. Because honestly, and I say this to the executive directors, I know how challenging it can be when you've got different people rolling in and rolling out of this really important job that is supposed to be your partner, that you have to change every couple of years and you've got to create a new relationship, right? So it's work for the executive directors, and I absolutely understand that. But I also absolutely believe that it's hard work that pays off for the benefit of the organization. So as managing strong partners, what together be thinking about what does the organization need and what can the board do to help? All right, this is really big. What does your organization need right now and what can the board do to help? Talk about what the board can be doing around fundraising, what they can be doing around finances and financial planning, with communication, maybe with risk assessment, or are there strategic decisions that need to be made about the organization or the programming you do? Can the board help with some scenario planning? Um, are there individual areas of expertise that the organization or you as an executive director need? Do you need somebody who's got some HR expertise or some legal expertise? Talk about what standing committees are essential for you to be able to continue to carry out your work. Or do you need some ad hoc structures to get the work done? So there's all these different talking about all these different issues that affect the organization as partners so that you can then carry out your work. Um, Board chairs, it is also, I want to remind you, very important to lead and encourage the board to support and evaluate the executive director. When I do my board governance workshop, I talk a lot about creating um, a culture of success, creating climate, sorry, for success. Or how can you, board chairs, with the board as a whole, create a climate within the organization that helps assure that your executive director is going to be able to be successful? And to do that, and also then to evaluate the executive director. That's really, really important. Also, when there are issues that come up, you don't want lots of different board members approaching the executive director. It's the chair that communicates with the executive director any issues or concerns that the board may have. So that, you know, is as the gatekeeper, is the board chair communicating with the executive director. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that only the executive director only talks to the chair, right? So they work with all of the board members. But, you know, when there's issues of concern or significant issues, it's usually the chair that will have that conversation. An executive director cannot have 9 bosses, 11 bosses, 15 bosses, whatever number of board members that your organization has. They really report primarily to the board chair, who represents the board as a whole. So fine, anyway, so executive directors and board chairs, it's really important that you also are going to work together to plan a concise and effective board meeting. It really is important that you do it together. And if you have board agendas that look the same month after month after month, or however often you do your meetings, there's something wrong there. That you should be having conversations about what's the purpose of this meeting together. You're talking about what is it we want to accomplish at this meeting? What's it going to take to accomplish that? What's the agenda going to look like? What are the issues or questions or topics that we want to talk about? And so together you're doing that to plan the meeting. So as I said, there are times when you are going to share leadership. So here, I like this little chart. It outlines what the executive director does, what the chair does, and then where you're going to share leadership. So executive directors, you are the one supervising and responsible for staff. Board members have nothing to do with the staffing. You are the one responsible for staffing and managing the organization. You manage all the fundraising efforts. You're engaging staff in your strategic plan implementation. You can see that what's on the slide here. You do staff development and you support the board. The chair is leading the board and managing the governance, making sure that you've got the financial resources you need. So they're adopting a fundraising and resource plan as addition to the budget or as part of the budget. You're making sure the committees are engaged and working on achieving the strategic plan. As the chair, you're working to enhance the public standing of your organization, et cetera, et cetera. Together, you are planning your board meetings together. Together, you're overseeing the fiscal stewardship of the organization. And you're also probably going to be doing this with the board treasurer. Together, you're working on resource development. It's not just the executive director. It's not just the board. You're working together on resource development. You're thinking about succession planning way before the executive directors even had a little tiny thought about leaving. You've got a succession plan in place, strategic planning, etc. Now, I'm going to try, y'all, and I am not the most savvy of technology folks, but I am going to put into the chat, and I'm talking while I'm scrolling. I have got a really wonderful chart that I'm putting into the chat right now. There we go. That gives you a lot more detail about the division of responsibilities between the executive director and the board chair. I really hope that you find this to be a helpful resource. It comes from BoardSource. I didn't mention, but I am a certified governance consultant with BoardSource, so that a lot of the information I give on boards comes from BoardSource. BoardSource, if you don't know who they are, is a wonderful national resource on all things related to boards. It's a membership organization, but you don't have to be a member to get some of their resources. They have 101 level resources that are really phenomenal, including this chart that are available to everybody. So there's my little plug for BoardSource. Anyway, I hope you find it's in the chat. I hope you find that helpful. It gives you a lot more detail than what's here on this slide.
Hey, Colleen.
Yes, Ben.
Hey, I think you might have put that link in the chat to just one person because it hasn't shown up for most.
Oh, let me see. See, I told you I'm trying to be so technologically savvy that it's not. You know what? Huh. Well, it says it goes to the meeting group.
Yeah, if you double check where it says 2 in the chat box and make sure it
Yeah,
says meeting group chat, it didn't
it
go
does.
through.
That's who it says.
If you wanna send it, email it to the staff, we can make. Ah, there we go. Bingo.
Got it. Okay. Yay. All right. So much for tech savvy, Colleen. Thanks for checking on that, Ben. I appreciate it. All right. So I said I was going to talk a little bit more about communication before we end up today. This is really, this is the foundation to whether or not you're building that good foundation, right? So we got a foundation under a foundation. It's so there's a couple of things around communication that I think you should be paying attention to. One is how important it is to talk about how you guys want to communicate regularly. So some people do much better by email, some people do by telephone, some people do in person, some people like video meetings. I would say make sure that you have a standard check-in. Talk to each other about how often you want to check in. Is it daily, every couple of days? But I would suggest that you have at least one personal contact, one personal communication on a regular basis, because I really believe that personal oftentimes is most effective. You pick up on all the other stuff that's really important, body language and all that kind of fun stuff. So thinking about how it is that you want to communicate, as I said a little bit a while ago, how important communication that is open and fair. You really want to be able to build trust among the two of you. And so to make sure that you've got those conditions that allow for candid conversations, that nobody's feelings are going to get hurt, that you are able to disagree and have good discussion and debates about things, to make sure that you're coming up with the best decisions and you're really able to work together. So make sure that the communication is open and fair. Really pay attention to communication styles, because you know what happens when we have different communication styles, and sometimes we make assumptions, right, about things. And so you want to make sure that when you have different communication styles, a lot of times that can cause for some challenges. As I said, do regular check-in, and you want your communication to be regular, maybe preferably weekly. You never want your chair to be surprised about what's going on. You want to talk about topics that matter. You want to keep the conversation at a higher level. You don't want to be talking about management stuff here necessarily, but you want to be talking about the stuff that really matters to the board, and it's got to be two-way communication. So here's some great topics to think about for the chair and the executive director to talk about. So keep each other apprised about changes in key staff. Now, you don't have to let the board know about every single change in staff, but if there's something really important, if you have a COO that changes or your development director that has left, perhaps, you want to be talking about challenges that are facing the organization when there are issues around finances. Maybe you just got a big grant, or maybe you did not get a big grant that you were expecting, keeping conversation about that, about projects, talking about fundraising all the time, about how that's going, how you can help support each other and how the board can help support those efforts. Keeping, upcoming events, can the chair attend for you? Are there deadlines? Just so there's, again, no surprises, and obviously setting the agenda for the board meetings. So that's a quick and dirty conversation about the relationship with the board chair and the executive director. I'm doing a real quick plug. Thank you, Madeline. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Together SC, about the program that I have just finished developing along with my partner, Ginny Waller. It's called TBH, or To Be Honest. It's designed for fundamental information about folks who have never been an executive director or are starting out, the basic fundamentals about how to run a successful nonprofit organization. If you have an interest in learning more, here's the website, capacitytodream.com, where you look up TBH. We're excited about it and trying to spread the word a little bit. If you're going to be at the Together SC Summit, I'll be there and can talk to you a little bit more about it. And that is everything I have for you at 11:29. I don't know if we've got any questions or comments to end up.
Colleen, it's Madeline.
Hey.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you very much for sharing so much in such a quick soundbite. To those of you that are with us today, I hope it wasn't overwhelming. As they say about the elephant, one bite at a time. Two things to add to Colleen's is remember that as your Together SC membership includes a free board chair welcome call with me or another member of the team, where we can have a chat and start with what's highest on your priority list. I have just stepped in onto a board of an organization that my mother started that's been floundering, and you can tell because I'm now board chair after being on there for two months. But I'm learning a lot, and if there's one thing I would say to those of you on the board, the first priority is building the engagement and your partnership with the other board members. So I'm delighted to offer to be there for one-on-one calls where that's helpful. And I hope we'll see you at the summit where you can take advantage of Colleen's offerings and so much more.
Thanks, Madeline. We did have a couple of questions. Someone asked, Deborah, you asked a minimum standard for the personal check-ins between executive director and board chair. I would say if you could do it weekly is at least would be really important. And Ashley asked, yeah.
I was going to say exact same thing, Colleen. You know, start with weekly, then move to every 2 weeks. And then if it needs to be monthly, you know, as things get under control, you won't need to talk as much.
Right. It's a lot of depend on what's going on with the organization, but I check in like, hey, how are things going is helpful. Ashley also said, given the frequent turnover of board members, would it be appropriate to have a vice chair involved in a lot of this so they can maintain flow when the chair leaves the organization? Absolutely, Ashley. I think that's a wonderful idea. I love the idea of mentoring. And it's really succession planning for your officers. And so if you have the ability to do that, you know, to have them as part, it's particularly during the last 6-9 months of the chair's service would be absolutely helpful. So yeah, I think that's a great question.
In fact, I would say I came onto this board with another woman who stepped into the vice chair role and is leading our governance planning. And she is my new best friend. It's so much more fun to do this work as a team.
Absolutely true. Okay, I got that. We got that. Okay, I think that's all of the questions. Y'all, thank you so much for joining us today. And I look forward to seeing some of you in Charleston at the summit. Thanks so much.